Hello, everyone, and welcome to this panel, SEMCON panel, about the Electronic Music Inclusion Initiative. We'll give you a bit more information about what that is. Briefly, I just wanted to get the panelists to introduce themselves briefly. So I'll start. I'm Raj Ramanandi, the co-founder and co-CEO of a technology organization called InChorus that tries to create harassment-free and inclusive workplaces. We're also one of the founding partners of the Emmy initiative that we're going to learn a little bit more about. Nadia, can we go to you next? Just a very brief intro.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Nadia Khan. I'm the founder of Women in Control. I've been working in the industry for around 20 years, primarily in music management, and that's kind of what led me to start up Women in Control. We do a lot of research and reporting, looking into highlight different areas of disparity across the industry. And I'm also the chair of the Association of Independent Music as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Nadia. Can we jump to you, please, Sam?
Yeah, sure. My name's Sam Warren, and I am co-chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group at the Association for Electronic Music. I'm also founder of In the Key of She, which is a research project exploring the career experiences of female and female identifying electronic music producers. And I'm doing that with my affiliation with the University of Portsmouth, where I hold a professorship.
Incredible. Thank you, Sam. Hi, Mark.
Hi, how are you? I'm Mark Lawrence, Director of Electronic Music at Sentric, also proud member of the Association for Electronic Music.
Brilliant. And finally, Susan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Gloy-Kruse, and I work at Beatport, Director of Industry Relations, also on the exec board of the AFEM, and really excited to talk about this initiative today.
Brilliant. Thank you all. As you can see, we have a very prestigious and knowledgeable panel with us today, so hopefully there'll be lots of gems for everyone to take away, not only about what this initiative is about, but also how I really want to lean into how other initiatives can learn from our strengths and our weaknesses. So what is EMII? So EMII, again, it's the Electronic Music Inclusion Initiative, very catchily named, but with very bold ambitions to try and create a more inclusive electronic music sector industry. We at InChorus approached AFEM with this idea, this kind of methodology that we have to try and create this kind of culture change across whole industries. And we were hugely supported by Greg and the team who made these key introductions to enable us to try and do this really impactful work. So we have a kind of methodology where we believe true progress around topics of diversity and particularly inclusion require industry-wide collaboration. We try and take an industry through a bit of a journey, I guess. And so we always start by building these coalitions. And the next phase is we try and kick off prior to leaning into action, getting some key data points. We don't overly stress the importance of research. Lots of research is done, and there are lots of reports out there where we know kind of prevalent problems across industries, but we like to get some specifics about a particular industry. I'm going to share a little bit more about those findings. Off the back of those findings, we, as I mentioned, we don't like to dump those kind of problems that we find on an industry and let them get on with it. We really believe that as a collective, we need to find those problems. We need to collectively find solutions that we believe in, and then we need to find some case studies where stakeholders across the industry are starting to implement some of those solutions. And only then do we go out to the wider industry more proactively to try and get them to sign up to those actions and those solutions. And we really kind of level up whole industries to do that. So I think that's enough about the kind of collective. I think we will drill into its pros and cons through the Q&A that we'll shortly do. Before I kick off into a few questions, I'm going to just quickly give a kind of, this is a sneak peek. We haven't made any of the findings public as yet, but I'm going to give us some high-level overview of some of the findings, because we'd like to kind of dig into elements of them. So we closed the research period, which lasted for a few weeks, about 3 weeks ago, and we found that the primary, I don't like using the word victim, but the primary individuals affected by harassment and discrimination in the industry are young women, and there was a very high incidence of these young women being women of colour. the overriding feeling that was coming through in the findings were feelings of anger and general feeling of unease and feeling uncomfortable. We also found a huge issue in terms of a lack of a speak up culture. Now, this may be down to the fact that there aren't the appropriate tools, but we also saw that even when presented with the opportunity to share anonymously experiences, there was a reticence to do so. And this is something where we believe there's a feeling of not a feeling of being safe within the industry, or perhaps worse, as a general apathy towards these issues, but we'll come to that in a second. As I mentioned, most of these issues were gender-based, and there was a large prevalence of everyday sexism kind of chipping away at people's confidence, and maybe worse, their opportunities to progress in the industry. There's an uncomfortably high rate of unwanted physical contact across the industry. Now, we do this research across industries, and yeah, when we say unusually high, it rates as high as we've seen in any industry to date. And I guess at that point, I want to stress again that this is affecting women, young women of colour, and so those incidents are primarily affecting young women of colour. We found that the incidents shared with us, we had over 600 incidents shared with us. This is not, and I stress, it's not like a survey response. Not everyone has something to say here. So the fact that we had that many incidents shared with us is really important, and we kind of really want to thank those that shared with us. They were sharing incidents that were happening repeatedly. Over 80% of these incidents were not one-offs. This is something that's systemic and it's endemic. And something else that we wanted to hammer home, or something that kind of really came through in the findings, was that a lot of these incidents were happening at live venues, at clubs and at festivals, where these behaviours are most prevalent, and nearly 50% of all incidents were in that setting, closely followed by at work, which is always staggering that these things are happening in the workplace, be they in office-based. We see an awful lot of these things happening online. So I think that's it in terms of the findings, and what we are leaning into off the back of that is a proposal for action. 3 key areas there. We want to develop tools and processes to create more of a speak up culture across the industry. Secondly, we want to build up greater awareness about these kind of everyday incidents of sexism, racism, all of the isms that seem to be very prevalent. And thirdly, we want to build, or certainly explore, opportunities to build resources and tools to make live venues safer. So that's far too much talk from me. I really wanted to go to the panel and say, when you're on first reading or hearing about our findings, what surprised you, and how did you feel when you first, kind of saw those numbers and those experiences in front of you? Can I go to you first, Mark?
Yeah, I guess I'm proud of the survey, and I'm embarrassed by the results. I'm angry it's our culture and our industry, and I'm sorry that is still the situation even today. I wish I was surprised, and I guess I'm not surprised, because my experience whilst at AFEM from sort of 2014 to 2017 was surrounded by anecdotal examples and awareness that we needed to act as an industry. At that time we launched the sexual harassment hotline, but I don't think that was the call to arms to the industry. And I don't think the industry at large committed at that point to understand the scale of the issue, to understand where the issue was, and to commit to do something about it. And I feel that this should be the catalyst for that.
Excellent. Sam, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely exactly the same as Mark. I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not. And yeah, very saddened that so many young women, and particularly women of colour, suffer in this way, just because they're going to work. That's what they're doing. And I was surprised that the high number of women of colour who've been so prevalent in the reports, which was shocking to me, actually. I've done 2 pieces of research, or been connected with 2 pieces of research that this connects to. The first one was with AFEM, which the results of which will shortly be launched or released. And that was the Association for Electronic Music Gender Diversity Survey. And there were 229 responses to that survey from the end of 2019 through to first quarter 2020. And we found there that there was a lot of prevalence. There was 50% of the women who answered the survey as minorities or identified as minorities experienced harassment or bullying. But even more than that is this more subtle, I'm not saying those things are not super important, but the everyday sexism, what's sometimes known as microaggressions, and the tiny little things that chip away at one's confidence and one's ability to do the job. And often that then gets reframed as minorities are not confident enough. They don't put themselves out there, when actually it's a systematic dismantling of that confidence over time through other people's reactions to them. And 71% of the women in the survey said that they had to act like one of the boys at work, so to deny aspects of themselves as women, and that half as many women as men felt that their work was taken seriously. So those were two findings that I think the Emmy connects with very much from the AFEM survey. And in the key of she, I've interviewed coming up for 60 women who are working in the music industry as artists. They're producers, not all are artists, most are producers, but also some other people involved in collectives and women's initiatives. And every single participant has a story to tell of some form of harassment, discrimination, put downs, belittling, patronizing, ranging from not being taken seriously as an artist to being denied entry to stages and venues to attempted rape. So every single one has a story. But what was very striking was that of those people's stories, so many of them explained them away or excused them, or said, well, you know, it's to be expected, it's our industry, or, well, I put myself in these positions, it's what I expect, I just deal with it, I just grow up and deal with it. And it was that normalization that I've found very shocking in the data that I've collected, and the fact that this anger, this hurt, this uncomfortableness, and all of the emotional and psychological work you have to do around that to make yourself feel better, to make your job bearable, is a huge source of additional labour or additional work that minorities take on compared to the dominant group. So there's lots more I could say, but that's my main connection.
Really interesting that there are clear echoes coming across these different research sets. And I guess to echo something that Mark was saying, is we're proud of the fact that we're going to move beyond the research here, hopefully, and really try and impact something. Before we move on to the next question, I know, Nadia, you've done bits of research with women in control as well. And I wonder whether some of your work has similar echoes, or if you've seen anything that's slightly different coming through.
Yeah, 100%. Like Mark and Sam mentioned, you know, I was completely unsurprised by the findings, because it mirrors a lot of the research that I've seen across the industry in different sectors, but also the research that I've been a part of as well. Earlier this year, for Women in Control, I released a report looking into the experiences of women in radio that are working in radio as their main job. And we spoke to over 120 women working in BBC, Bauer, Global, and the independent and community radio stations. And, you know, going back to what you said at the start about the speak up culture, the stories that we got were horrific, but we had to keep everybody's stories anonymous because nobody was felt comfortable to speak out. And that is a big issue in the industry, because, you know, that risk factor that's involved, whether it's a financial risk or being shunned from the industry, is still there. So, and mirroring the results of those findings as well, you know, 70% felt that their appearance had an effect on their career progression, 39% have felt unsafe at work, and Sam, you mentioned, you know, 50% having experiences of harassment, and that mirrors the musicians union study as well. But the problem is that these experiences are not being industry-wide stopped and shut out and saying that this is not acceptable. It kind of just seems to carry on. And a big factor in that is why I started Women in Control, because it was mainly stemming from my own experiences working in music management. Over the years, my confidence got knocked down because I started to feel completely invisible, ignored when I was going to gigs. I've been thrown off festival stages where my artist is performing. I've not been able to get into venues. I've been laughed at by security. I've just been completely ignored. Or when I've gone into video shoots, I'm automatically assumed to be an assistant or a stylist or an extra, and just pushed into those gender roles. And over the first decade of my career in management, that slowly chipped away at my confidence and made me not speak out and not be more assertive. And that's kind of partly the reason why I kind of wanted to look into this with Women in Control. And mirroring what Sam said as well, once I started to speak to other women, I found that they had the exact same experiences and they also didn't speak out about it. So that was a big driving force for me to kind of really be open about my experiences with Women in Control and actually kind of try and change that culture within, you know, what I can do and the network that I reach out to.
Excellent. There was an interesting thing that Sam, you mentioned about particularly women explaining their experiences away and kind of, and therefore this becoming normalized. I don't know, Susan, is that something that you've witnessed kind of just in your experiences through the industry? Is that something that you hear other women doing, saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always, we tend to explain ourselves and we tend to feel guilty for things that happen. And we just don't want to be perceived as difficult because we speak up about incidences. And I think this is the reason behind why, even if we have the self-esteem to speak up, to share experiences, then we always add something like, yeah, but it wasn't too bad. I got out of the situation. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I saw this with myself. I saw it with friends. And it's definitely something that is obvious in the industry.
It's something that we talk an awful lot about at InChorus, where these things that these everyday things are happening. So they're so prevalent that they kind of fall into this, even though they're more prevalent, they fall into this grey area where it's unclear whether it's your fault or somebody else's fault, and things are explained away. And I think there's a big role here for Emmy to, for educational purposes, to just yeah, kind of create that awareness that this isn't on you, and if you feel something, that it's something that you ought to share or deal with in a way that suits you. Yeah, it's really interesting. Some of the things that aren't expressly said in the research, but is definitely something that explains a lot of that research. Okay, that was really interesting. Looking at first responses to the findings, lots of echoes of other research that's already out there. Let's hope that we can kind of move forward and be more proactive and try and help more people as an initiative. What I wanted to kind of lean into next was how the kind of the methodology that we come at this with might help or hinder our progress in terms of actually moving on from the research into those actions. I talked earlier about those kind of key principles of coalition, findings, problem solution, case study, and then try and bring the industry along with you. Nadia, I know that you've been party to other initiatives, research, campaigns. What is it that you think stands Emmy in good stead to be successful in this a hugely ambitious endeavour?
Yeah, I think that what's been different about working with Emmy has been the collaboration aspect. I feel like, you know, I think it's so great that there's so many different organizations out there doing this work, you know, that Women in Control does, the F List and Girls Irate. I see so many great organizations doing that, and they exist because there's such a widespread problem and issue. But the problem that we've had, there's so much data out there, the problem that we have is actually enacting change or affecting change. And without industry-wide take-up or industry-wide action, there's not going to be that change. So I think that having that collaborative effort is going to really make that impact, because I've done the data, or I know of data that just is exactly the same across, you know, all of the industries. You know, I did a report looking into how many female musicians are played on the radio, and, you know, men feature on 81% of all of those records. I've done research looking into the lack of representation of women, and also, you know, intersectionally looking at just Black women as well, representation of them within senior levels. And there's a real issue across the industry, and I feel like we need to disrupt that from the top down. And it can feel really overwhelming because it's the same thing no matter what sector that you look into. But through that collaboration, I feel like we're actually getting somewhere to change, because I'm exhausted looking at the same data. It's now time for action. You know, I think the first step is, and data is really powerful in helping us to for people to accept that there is a problem, is an issue. Like Susan mentioned, oftentimes as a woman, when I felt that I bring issues up, I can be deemed as difficult, or you can be gaslit and kind of dismissed in certain ways as well. So I think the power of collaboration just really helps to amplify that message. And yeah, I really feel like it's time for action and time for change. So that's what I'm really most excited about with this.
Excellent. I don't know whether Mark or Sam, I'm going to come to Susan specifically to talk about why Beatport got involved afterwards, but I wonder whether kind of from a Sentric music perspective, perhaps, and I guess I should stress that this work was made possible by the generosity of Sentric Music, Beatport, Pioneer DJ, as well as the kind of reach and credibility of our other partners. Yeah, perhaps to you, Mark. Having been being an industry veteran and perhaps seeing other initiatives kind of fall by the wayside or maybe being successful, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it was important for us on two levels as a company. One is that we put a lot of sincere time and effort within our organization on ensuring that we're diverse, and that's diversity led by employee effort and leadership effort combined. It's not a kind of top-down approach, it's not a bottom-up approach, it's an organizational effort, but also a genuine feeling of responsibility for the industry that the electronic music division works with and represents, you know, and our roster is wonderfully diverse. I feel that we have a very open culture, and we felt that it was important for us to commit to the initiative to drive that forward. You know, it's a male-led industry in a male-led society and has been for a very long time. So initiating change will take a long time. But what I feel is different now is that the middle ground is balanced, nuanced, sensitive and understanding. And of course, the extreme positions are still the extreme positions. But I think more hearts and minds can be won in the centre than ever before. And evidence is a great way to win hearts and minds. And that's certainly why we supported this.
Yeah, Sam, Susan, whether you'd like to add anything to that from your experiences?
Yeah, could I just add that to say that something that's really important here is there is a tendency, I see it within this industry, but also elsewhere in my research and work as a professor of organisation studies, there is a tendency to blame the minority, to blame the women. The women need to fix themselves. The problem is on the minority or on the woman to fit in, to grow up, to get tough, to grow a backbone, you know, or I'm not going to say man up, but you know, all of those terms, where actually, you know, women need to be more confident. We hear this all the time. These women are incredibly confident. They're not in need of development or help. What they need is a less hostile environment to be in. And that's where the change needs to happen. It's environment, not the individual.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Susan, did you want to add to that? Yeah,
totally.
Please.
So, you know, internally at Beatport, we actually already had implemented the InChorus app. So really to give every one of our employees a safe space to speak up if they, you know, felt more comfortable doing it there. And in addition, we just launched internally an unconscious bias training. And of course, this is, you know, showing a lot of people are understanding way more how other people might feel in certain situations. So this is really coming to life, you know, really showing that we're committed to diversity, and not just internally, but definitely within our community. And so, yes, AFEM, definitely a friend of ours, you know, brought this opportunity to us. And we were convinced because it's evidence-based, it's sustainable, and it shall be a systematic change and surrounding diversity. And as we said earlier, you know, collaboration is key. And then when we knew that Pioneer, Women in Control, Sentric, and other progressive partners would be on board to all, you know, tackle these issues together, we were really confident that there is success at the end of this initiative, or throughout the initiative, because it shall not end.
Yeah.
So making the real change in our community, and the partners involved, and the approach that was decided on was definitely what made Beatport participate.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to ask the toughest question. I'm going to throw it at you, Susan, but it's What does success look like here? You know, we keep talking about making the change and action, and yeah, anyone do step in. Is like, you know, I would struggle to answer that question. I can ground it in what I need to do next week and what I need to present back to the Emmy committee next time we meet, and it's, you know, it's quite tangible. But for those whose job it isn't, it would be great to understand what does success look like in 2 or 5 years from this initiative. It'll be very clear.
Yeah, I'm super happy to answer this, because one of the 3 key areas that already were identified that we want to work on is the allyship. And I think if we see this ASAP, and not just within 2 or 5 years, that more, you know, male in the industry show up as allies, like you and Mark are doing. You know, it's so important and so easy. You know, if we witness behavior, then not just look away and do it. And if this is the new normal, then this is the success around it. And like this will come naturally, that you feel safer to go into the club, even on the way to the club and on the way back home. It starts always that you have the support and do not feel like a minority.
Brilliant. Nadia, Sam, I know this is work that you're also doing, so it'd be great to see, to hear your views on what success might look like.
Yeah, I feel like, again, it's just about, I want to see that culture shift in the workplace or in the music industry as a whole. And I think that comes from the people that are working in the industry. As Susan mentioned, having that allyship and having everyone take a strong stand against it and say that it's not acceptable, and encouraging that speak up culture. It comes, you know, mirrors like, you know, that the drink driving, you know, it didn't stop drink driving because it became illegal. It actually became socially kind of unacceptable. So we need to change that social culture within the music industry and have that shift there to say, you know, this is completely unacceptable. If a woman or a young woman is going into her workplace and she's being treated in a certain way, she needs to know that that's not acceptable, and this company or whoever she works for is not going to accept that, and that she has those reporting tools to carry on. So it is about, you know, creating that awareness, but it has to be that industry-wide acceptance. So yeah, I would, for success to have that in 2 years would be incredible. So I would love to see that.
Yeah, it's a great example you give.
Yeah, just to follow on for that, I don't have a lot more to add to those excellent points from Susan and Nadia, that it is about you going to work, being able to go to, everyone can go to work without fear, and knowing that other people have got your back. And people who are bystanders, there's a lot of research in the literature on organizational bullying where it's the role of the bystander, it's other people speaking up, people who perhaps have less to lose than the person that's the target of the bullying or the harassment, advocating and standing up. And if there's more than one person, obviously that's even better, but it's definitely the role of the bystander or the ally who is so important here, because they're often very difficult situations, very emotive, very emotional, and that's definitely the way forward.
Excellent. I think we have time to cover one more topic that I think is particularly interesting, again, because this is my day job. So we've kind of looked at what success looks like. It's not going to be easy. I wonder whether any of you have really clear opinions of where the collective might struggle the most. Where is it going to be hardest to make those inroads? Is it, so I had a brief background working in corporate innovation, which is to try and help larger organizations change their culture to be more entrepreneurial. And you would always say, if you draw an organization as a triangle, you'd always talk about the center of that as a sticky middle. It was easy to get the leadership bought in, but you'd hit that kind of middle management, and it would be really hard to make change through that layer. I wonder whether there are similarities with an industry level when you're saying, we have a coalition here, we have great intentions, we have clear steps that we want to take. Where are we going to struggle? I don't know who would like to take that.
I'll take that. I think the challenge that presents itself to us as an industry is the lion's share of the industry is small companies with 2, 3, 4, 5 people, no HR departments, no HR policies, not necessarily any experience in policy or organization or any of the things that we're talking about. Just people try and do their best to make a living in a difficult environment, even more difficult at the moment. So, you know, it is relatively easy to get big organizations to sign up to change and to effect that change. It's much harder to get a giant global flotilla of small businesses to sign up to make change, where their purpose for getting out of bed in the morning is to try and get the next gig, or to sign the next act, or to sign the next track to a label. And I think the big wave of change is by harnessing that flotilla of small businesses. That's the challenge. It's the opportunity.
Yeah, no, key insight, I think. Anyone else on that?
Oh, I'll just jump in quickly to say absolutely, Mark. That is a huge challenge. And the other thing is actually getting people to go beyond lip service. So it's the, you know, saying that you'll do things, having policies, having even having an app is often, you know, impression management, not even necessarily intentionally. It's often done with good intentions, but following that through and making sure behavior and action follows is also very difficult, because it's an uncomfortable thing to be involved with. And the third thing, of course, is unconscious bias. You don't even know that you're behaving in a way that someone else finds uncomfortable. And maybe we say, well, you should know, but let's work on making sure people do know. I think those are the main issues. But absolutely, Mark, I love that, the flotilla of individual businesses. It's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's something we were made aware of as we looked at the industry and how to impact change. We knew it was very out of office, and the industries that we'd worked in previously were very in office. So yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see how we can, you know, this isn't going to be magic wand and it's going to happen. I think it's going to require a different approach, which is a much more experimental approach, but being aware of that is fantastic.
And unfortunately, it takes a little bit of patience, because as Mark said earlier, change takes time. And, you know, it has been like this for quite some time. And to really get this into everyone's DNA will take time. So Emmy definitely needs to stay present, and we need to follow up on this on a very regular basis, and then we will be successful.
Amazing. I think we are wrapping up on our time. I think this has been brilliant, because we've not, what I didn't want this to be is an advert for Emmy, although it's been a great advert for Emmy, and we encourage any organizations that think they can benefit from it, want to support it, get involved, please do reach out. You can either reach out to AFEM directly, or you can find my details via the InChorus website. We've shared some of those findings, and I think one of the things that really came through for me is that this idea of what does success look like, and it's about trying to create this new normal where what we've taken to be decades, maybe millennia of bias, discrimination, to try and tackle that, break that down. We've seen the successful examples of that with Drink Drive campaign, certainly out of the UK and across Europe. Yeah, hopefully in 10, 15 years time, people are talking about these types of initiatives having been successful when they're trying to tackle other big problems. I don't want to end this with me being the last person to speak. So if you have any final parting thoughts, we can go around. If you have, put your hand up, and yeah, I'd love to hear you speak. No, this is exactly what I didn't want. Nadia, you look like you have something to say.
No, just in close, I just wanted to just jump in on that previous point that you'd made, just in kind of just what some of the challenges are. And I think that the industry has the history of kind of prioritizing profitability over humanity. And I think that's the big struggle that we're going to have to change across any organizations, is kind of actually making sure that we're putting people first and their well-being.
Yeah, brilliant, really worthy words. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Samcom, for the invite. Thank you, AFEM, for putting it all together. I wish you enjoy the rest of your conference experience. Cheers.